Just like clockwork, every single time I review a game that's exclusive on PC, one of the first questions in the comments is always somebody asking about a console port. You don't have to go much further than my reviews of Heidelberg 1693 and Record of Lotus War to see PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch owners hopeful that these great-looking games come to their favorite systems. If that describes a game that you're hoping gets ported, then I'm here to remind you to never give up. It may take a long time, but there's always a chance. Just look at the 1980s-inspired action game Donuts'N'Justice. From the moment this retro-themed run-and-gun shooter hit PCs back in 2016, console gamers have been begging one-man developer FobTi for a port. 5 years later, and Donuts'N'Justice has finally come home, giving a whole new audience a chance to take a delicious bite out of crime. But was it worth the lengthy wait? Put down that pastry, because we're about to find out. Donuts'N'Justice takes us back to an era when sunglasses could be worn at night and putting on socks was optional. That's right, it's the 1980s, when crime flooded the streets and corruption was at an all-time high. But don't worry, because buddy cop duo Mike Riggs and Nick Gordon are on the beat to take out thugs, biker gangs, and anything else that gets in the way of their donuts and, to a much lesser degree, justice. The action plays out like a more cartoony and less tone-deaf version of NARC, where our hero cops slowly walk from left to right, shooting pretty much everybody and everything. The gameplay is largely limited to only two buttons, one that shoots the gun left and the other that shoots the gun right. The goal is to weave through the hordes of enemies dodging bullets, picking up power-ups, and throwing useful grenades when those cops get into real trouble. Now, this may sound simple, but don't go into Donuts'N'Justice expecting it to be easy. This is a punishingly difficult shooter where life is fleeting and dying means that you're gonna have to start over from the very start of the level. Individually, these enemies really aren't that difficult to take down. However, these pesky criminals have a bad habit of swarming the cops, which never ends well. The gang members are a lot like zombies in that sense. With bullets flying everywhere and enemies rushing in from all sides, there's a real feeling that you're never safe. This is the kind of game where you should expect to die over and over until you finally get it right. Thankfully, the game knows that you're gonna need a little help and is good about unlocking new guns. Mike and Nick will pick up badges dropped by certain enemies, which go towards earning shotguns, missile launchers, Uzis, freeze guns, and all kinds of other hardware, which you'll pick up at random from item drop-offs. You'll also be able to boost the power of these guns for just a few seconds, and even slow down time by eating a green donut. I'm not entirely sure how that works, but it's easily the most useful item found in the game, and it's not even close. Oddly enough, the one time that you don't need these weapons and power-ups is when you're going up against the 5 bosses. For a game that prides itself on being brutally tough, I was surprised by the embarrassingly easy boss battles. I'm not exaggerating when I say that you can beat all of them in well under a minute, usually without taking any damage. There's no need to memorize patterns or find a weak spot, because just as long as you're shooting and moving around, you'll never die. Even the final and supposedly hardest boss is a complete pushover, to the point where I was honestly a little surprised there wasn't more to the fight. This may be one of the weakest parts of the game, but it's far from the only problem plaguing Donuts'N'Justice. With only 4 levels to play through, this is one of those games that ends right when it's starting to get good. Even by the standards of 1980s arcade games, this is a short and shallow shoot-'em-up that is over far too quickly. And once the credits roll, there's very little reason to keep playing. The only thing that gets unlocked is a special boss rush mode, which repackages one of the weakest parts of the entire game. But even if there were more levels and the boss fights were better, I would still find Donuts'N'Justice to be lacking that special ingredient. The problem is that the core shoot-'em-up action just isn't very fun, and the gunplay is never satisfying. It doesn't help that the camera perspective makes it difficult to dodge enemy fire and attacks, resulting in a lot of cheap hits and frustrating deaths. The graphics look good and the soundtrack is certainly catchy, but Donuts'N'Justice is a half-baked idea that never lives up to its potential as either an action-packed shoot-'em-up or a parody of the 1980s. Now let me tell you, you definitely don't want to eat a half-baked donut. A mix of Miami Vice and NARC, Donuts'N'Justice is a shoot-'em-up throwback that skewers the over-the-top craziness of the 1980s. With simple gameplay and an endless supply of cheap deaths, this run-and-gun shooter would have fit in perfectly at the local arcade. Too bad the short length and way too easy boss fights keep this long-overdue port from earning a recommendation. Yeah, this game is full of donuts, but sadly, justice is nowhere to be found. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite cop game? It can be good cops or bad cops or, something in between. Just as long as cops are featured. Hell, even RoboCop. No, maybe not RoboCop, because those games are just not very good. Either way, let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back shortly with a review of Astalon, Tears of the Earth, followed by a week full of E3 coverage. Man, I can't believe it is so close! If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.